I've studied literally thousands of tracks by some of the world's biggest music producers, and I've discovered 8 vocal secrets they're using to hook their listeners that will instantly improve your music, regardless of whether you produce pop, melodic house, trance, or even industrial techno with no vocals. What? How does that work? Well, a couple of these tips will enhance even instrumental music. Not only am I going to show you how to execute each of these vocal techniques, I'm also going to advise you on how you can combine them and which genres they're suitable for. Now, I made a video on this a couple of years ago, but now I've discovered even more nuance, which I've also put in a free guide which you can download below. These are the exact techniques our accelerator students have used to accrue well over 100 million streams, so I absolutely guarantee they're going to help you too. So without further ado, let's hop into the door and get it done. Now, this first trick is really useful if you want your vocals to take front and center stage, so this could be great for pop or a vocal-led dance track. So if you're working with a singer, quite often you'll ask them to record backing vocals, harmonies, ad-libs, all of that good stuff, so you can make lovely full vocal stacks. But what if you're downloading a vocal stem from somewhere like Splice or LoopCloud and you've only got the lead vocal? Well, they're usually recorded in mono, so we want to make it sound much wider and fuller than that. So here's how you do it. This is the vocal on its own with the track. Some of you might recognize this. So it's a nice vocal, but it's just sounding a bit flat and boring. So the first tip I suggest is just doubling up that vocal and creating a vocal double. Now this is sung on the same note as the original, but the timing is slightly different, so it makes it sound like several people are singing at once. And as I said, usually the singer would record several takes so you can just stick them all together. But if you've only got the one take, what you can do is create that timing discrepancy by using something like the groove pool in Ableton or the equivalent in your DAW. And what this does is just move some of the transients slightly off the grid, much like a real person singing. It's not going to be exactly the same timing every time. So now instead of this, we've got this effect. But it's still very mono and a bit boring in the stereo field. So you can use a free tool called the Ozone Imager, and that just allows you to push it out to the sides and create something with stereo width. So let's do that now. So now, it's gone from this to this, already sounding better. On to the next tip, which is creating a deep layer. So let's double it up one more time, and all we're gonna do is select Complex Pro as the warp algorithm and then drop down 1 octave, so that's 12 semitones. And now if we shift the formant, it's going to sound a little bit weird, but it can really thicken up the vocals. Now if you don't have Ableton, you could also use something like Soundtoy's Little Alter Boy to pitch it down and change the formants. So we'll select it there, we'll play the other vocals, and we'll just bring this in very quietly underneath. Listen how thicker it sounds already. Amazing. But now I want to show you something really special, creating our own harmonies. So if we take that same idea of duplicating the track, this time we are going to turn off that pitch bend, put the formants back to normal. And now what we can do is chop up this vocal into different syllables with every note she sings, and then we can change the pitch of each of these separate clips individually. Now this is a very painstaking thing to do, and it does take time because you have to make sure that each of these clips is in tune. Like so. So then you end up with something like this, which sounds a bit weird on its own. But when we play it with our other vocal tracks, we end up with this. If I say goodbye, then make me a liar, make me a liar. So that sounds pretty amazing, right? But what I was asked about last time is how do I know which notes to use in the harmony? So here's how you do it. Now a quick way of doing this would be to use something like Melodyne, but I wanted to show you with the plugins that you probably already own. I've created a separate instrument with the piano on it. And what we need to do is make sure that all of the harmony notes fall within the same key that we're writing in. Now the way I'm going to do that is get our lead vocal, I'm going to right click on it, and I'm just going to go convert melody to new MIDI track. Then I can take that melody, you can see it's drawn out the MIDI notes that vocal is hitting, and this isn't always completely accurate. So the way that I check it, I'll go into the piano roll editor, and then I'm going to select the key that we're working in, which for this track is C minor. So I'm going to select C minor, Celine minor, and then I'm going to hit scale. Now we can see a couple of these notes aren't purple, so that means they're falling outside of the scale, and they're probably just analyzed wrong. So I'm just going to delete them, hit scale twice, and then we can see all of these notes are within the scale. And it sounds like this. So you can hear we're missing a couple of those notes. You could fill them in if you wanted, so let's just try that. And you can just use the vocal lead track to help you trace this in. So then we end up with something like this. Now to work out the harmonies, still in scale mode, we can start drawing in notes a third or a fifth or a seventh above this main line. So let's just take this up to the fifth. And I'm just going to write in notes using the scale mode that are going to work together. And I can test them listening to just the piano. And it should work because it's all in the same key. And once you've done that, you can delete the original lead melody notes like this, and then use the harmony notes that you've programmed in to work as a template to adjust the pitch of each of your separate clips. As I say, very painstaking, but the end result is amazing. Listen to this. Sounds good because I've got reverb and stuff on there, but check this out when it all comes in. Here we go. So rich. I still love that after 2 years. Now, this second trick is something that's been used a lot in music production over the last 10 or 20 years. One particularly huge track was DJ Snake and Major Lazer, Lean On. And this is creating an instrument out of your vocals. Now, this is actually updated on the video I've made about this before, and I have to say a big thanks to Kashmir for this advanced tip that I'm going to show you today. So this is our track with a normal vocal line. Such a groove. And before, I've shown how to create a vocal instrument by chopping out one of these syllables and then loading it into a sampler, and it sounds like this. But you'll notice that every one of those vocal chops sounds the same, but just on a different pitch. So let's really take things to the next level with what I'm about to show you. We're going to go back to our vocal, and we still need to select syllables where she's just holding one note. And these could be short, that's absolutely fine. So I think there's one here. So it's going to sound something like this. And you'll see I'm just cutting that. So there's one. Let's get 4 others. Once you've got 4 or 5 different vowels that you like the sound of, copy them onto a new audio track. Like so. And then the next thing we need to do is consolidate this. And it's all going to become clear in a minute. Next, we want to right-click on that and again, convert melody to new MIDI clip. And this once again is going to show which notes we're actually hitting with these vowels. And that's going to be very important in a minute. So I'm just going to copy that MIDI clip and then undo until we get to the point where these haven't been consolidated into one clip. Then we create a MIDI channel and we put a simpler onto that MIDI channel. This is what we're going to load our vocal chops into. Then we drag in the first chop into that simpler, like so. And we want to hit warp and make sure it's warped to Complex Pro. Then I'm going to group that, which will allow us to duplicate it. So I'm just going to call this chop. Let's just duplicate it 3 times. And then we can bring in those other chops into these other samplers or simplers. So let's bring this one in. Let's bring this one in. And then let's bring the last one in. Now, at the moment, if you play that simpler, that actually sounds pretty cool. It's playing all of those samples at the same time, and we want to be able to play one at a time. So you can open up this button here, press velocity, and then right-click and distribute ranges equally. So usually the velocity is how hard you hit a note, and it's usually assigned to the volume of that note. So you hit it more softly and the note plays quieter. But in this instance, we want all the velocities to play at the same volume, but we want each velocity to trigger a different one of these samples. So first thing I'm going to do is make sure that I take off that velocity to volume and then copy it to all the other simplers within that rack. So now we have this. So depending on how hard I hit the note, it's going to play a different chop. So we can almost play it as an instrument, but not quite yet. Firstly, we need to make sure that all of these samples are tuned to middle C. And if we repaste that MIDI clip that we had earlier, we can see it's going to tell us which notes each vocal chop is hitting. So this first one, for instance, if we zoom in, this vocal chop here, is hitting G. Now we need this to be tuned to C. So if we go into our MIDI instrument, go to that first MIDI chop, we can take that down, what it needs to go from G down to C, or we can take it up from G up to C. Either way is fine. So if we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 semitones above the G, that's going to be the C. So let's just do that. I'm going to go in here and then I'm going to transpose it 5 semitones up. And now middle C on that vocal chop is the same as middle C on a MIDI instrument. So once we've done the same thing with our other 3 vocal chops, we can use that as an instrument. So the second one is hitting on D. So we just need to take it down 2 semitones to get that C. We can take that down by 2 semitones. Now I can see that the third vocal chop was also in the same position. So we just take that down 2 semitones. And then the last one is a G as well. So we already know we can put that up 5 semitones. Boom. And feel free to watch this again if it seems a bit complicated. So now we can get rid of that track. We've got our instrument, and depending on how hard we hit the note, it's going to play a different vocal chop. So now let's bring our vocal chop melody over there. And what I'm going to do is vary the velocity. I'm just going to randomize the velocity like so. So you can see each of these notes is now a different velocity, and this is what it sounds like. And with some effects on there and some other layers, this is what we end up with. Nice! Now this third trick is absolutely great for adding extra interest to your tracks and filling out the spaces where the vocals aren't playing. There are several ways to do this, but the way I'm going to show you is the way I like to do it. So if we listen to this track, we'll notice that at the end of the vocal phrase, there's a bit of a space, even with the vocal reverb. And then nothing really kind of happens in the track until we get to the next vocal phrase. But what happens if we want to fill up this space? Well, as we're going to look at in a couple of minutes, we don't want to just throw another instrument in there. So what I've done is actually automated a send control out to an auxiliary channel that has got an incidental echo. I call them incidental effects because they aren't applied all the time. We just apply them now and again. So now let's listen to what happens when we hit that point in the track. And we'll see what happens on this auxiliary channel. Ready? We can hear that echo now. And then all you need to do is just automate that send control up or down wherever you want to do it. And the beauty of this technique is you don't just have to limit it to one effect. You could have 2 or 3 different auxiliary channels with different incidental effects that you automate the send control out to fill out the track and create some really special moments. I love this. If you're enjoying this, let me know in the comments and let's get on to this next tip. It kind of relates to the previous tip to a degree, but the hallmark of new producers is when their music invariably doesn't sound very full or polished, they usually try and add in a load of extra instruments to try and get it sounding full. Now, I've made this mistake loads of times myself, so it's perfectly understandable, but the mark of a professional sounding track is when it uses what I call timbral cohesion. And this is basically where you use the core sounds to create other offshoot sounds to fill up the space of the mix and gel everything together. And this is exactly how some of the biggest artists get their music sounding so glossy and well put together. So in this example, we've got a remix of Sabrina Carpenter that I've been working on. It sounds like this. Nice. So what I want to do is create a vocal sound bed that's just going to fill up the atmosphere and just create an added layer of depth. So this is what we've got. And if we listen to that with just the drums, it sounds way better. So this is off. And this is on. So what it's doing, it's actually introducing people to the timbre of the sound before the vocals are introduced. It's also letting them know what key the track is in. It's really subliminal and it's hard to determine, but it's doing that job. So the way I've done that is I went to the main vocals. I just found a little bit of a breath or a small part of the vocal that's not too distinctive or big. So that O bit sounds quite good because it kind of ends on that every couple of bars. So then I would just create a new channel and I would just duplicate it like so. I'm going to consolidate it, then I'm going to reverse it. So then we end up with this effect. And if it's looped, it's going to end up sounding like this throughout the whole track. And it's important that you just have it that's hitting really one note. We don't want it playing several notes in a sequence. So that sounds horrible at the moment, but this is how you can soften it back and really get it working as an atmospheric sound bed. We can see on the one that I made before, I added a reverb and put it to 100% wet. So let's have a listen to what that does. This is without the reverb. Just a short decay, not too long, and what that's doing is actually just dampening down the transients. Then we can use a filter to add more movement over time and take out the low end and any other frequencies that we don't want. Maybe take out some of the high frequencies. And then the last thing we can do is add an auto pan, which is just going to add more movement in the stereo field as it goes left and right. And at this point, you could decide to have a sidechain compressor bouncing it against the kick drum. And then our final result is something like this. And this is really good for genres like Afro House and Techno as well. So that's off, and this is on. Altogether, it sounds like this. Off, on. So nice. That's already sounding amazing, but this next trick is going to show you how to blend different sections of your arrangement together. So if you've got a vocal that comes in, it doesn't sound suddenly jarring. And here are a couple of prime examples. So this is how you create something similar. At the moment, when the track starts, the vocals just suddenly come in like this. Which is cool, but they just come in very suddenly. So here's how I'm going to create a reverse reverb to smooth that transition in and let people know something's about to happen. So I'll create a new audio channel, and then I'm going to take just the first syllable of the vocals, and it's going to sound like this. So it's just a turn from turn off the light. I'm going to consolidate that, then I'm going to reverse it. So it's going to sound like this. Now it sounds a bit funny at the moment, but look what happens when we put a reverb on there. And then put quite a long decay. It's going to sound like this. So what we need to do now is create another channel, audio channel. Make sure that the input is set from this one. So let's just call it syll for syllable. Take the input from that channel. And then we're just going to record that playing through the reverb like so. And we'll let it play out. Next thing we need to do is just reverse that recorded reverb. So at the moment it sounds like this. If we hit R in Ableton or double click and then press reverse, we can now get rid of that little syllable track, then drag it back so that leads in to the first syllable of the vocals. And I'm just going to kind of blend it in with the first syllable of the vocals. And what we can do is also add some extra bonus effects like a bit of auto pan, which I like to do this. You don't have to do it, but I'm kind of getting excited now. So we're going to put an auto pan on there. Then I'm going to increase the amount and the rate of this auto pan. So it's going to start like this. But now watch what happens when we automate up the rate of that auto pan. It's going to just intensify the effect as we get towards the end.
Turn up the lights, we're hitting the floor. A rhythm so tight, we're ready for more.
Now, the beauty of that tip is you can actually use that for instruments as well. It doesn't have to be vocals. So here's a quick example of that. Now, this situation is slightly different because the sound that we want to introduce is this piano. And it's playing chords which are already playing on the bass notes before this in the track, like so. So unless this first chord here is the same as the last chord in the progression, it's potentially going to sound out of tune. So I'm going to do that same trick, but using the last chord in the piano chord progression. So it should then match. So what I'm going to do is just copy that one chord like so. We'll put it over here. So it's just that nice bright chord. Then I'm going to do exactly the same thing as we did with the vocals. So first we want to record that piano, as we can't just reverse it because it's in MIDI. So let's take the input from piano, take that as the input, and then we are going to record it. It's going to sound like this. So there's our piano. At that point, we could just reverse that, or we could add the reverse reverb and do it fully. So I'm just going to press R to reverse that. There's one more step than there was for the vocals because we've had to go from MIDI to audio. And now I'm just going to add a reverb to that reversed piano note, like so. And then we'll need to create another audio channel because we'll have to record that reversed and reverbed piano chord. So let's just call that reverse piano, so we know which one to select down there. And then we can just record that first strike. We don't need the whole tail. And then this is our reverse piano chain. So we can get rid of this one. We can get rid of this chord here. It's done its job. Then for this, we just need to reverse it like so. And then line it up to the beginning of the chord progression. It's going to do exactly the same kind of thing as what we did with the vocals. And let's just turn this up so we can see what's happening a bit. And I want that loudest point to be when the piano starts. So now we introduce the piano like this. So it just fades in a little bit before it starts. Summer vibes. Okay, we're getting close, but there are still a couple of very powerful tips I've got to show you. And the next one is one I learned from Timbaland and Justin Timberlake years ago. And it can really spice up your drums and rhythm sections. So here's how you do it. Now, what I've done is collect little vocal samples over the years, either from vocal stems or vocals I've recorded from different vocalists. And then I just cut out the little breaths. Anything I think that sounds pretty cool and could work in a rhythm, so really short, sharp sounds. And then I spread some of them wide in the stereo field, have some of them mono. Now, I found it's important to have the sustain full and the release really short, so that when each MIDI note ends, the sound stops, otherwise things can get really cluttered. So on its own, it's sounding like this. Sounds weird, right? But when this works with the drums, and you see that I programmed these in on the specific snare skip points, then we get this kind of effect. And if you want to learn about snare skip points, you can check out my music production for producers course below this video. We go into all of that, but this is what it sounds like when it's all together. So it's quite fun. And with everything else, now, this next trick was actually devised as far back as the 1930s. That's almost 100 years ago, but it's still being used today. So here are 3 examples of it being used in the 1970s, the 1990s, and from the last couple of years.
So tell me how deep is your
it kind of sounds like your synthesizer is singing, and here's how you do it. It's using a tool called a vocoder. Now, if you have a vocal without the vocoder on it, it's going to sound pretty standard, a bit like this. Which sounds nice.
I'll keep on dancing with your pheromones, and I feel alive.
But what if we want to create that lovely chord effect like a synthesizer's actually singing? Well, the first thing to do is to just duplicate the chords that we've got playing on another instrument. Like this. This is the quickest way to do it. So I've created a second synthesizer channel like this. Now I've actually set it to sends only, so we never actually hear this signal through the master channel. It's just going to be sent out to the vocoder. So we're going to put a vocoder on our vocal channel like this. And I'm also going to boost the volume slightly, cut out some of the low frequencies, and add a bit of an echo. So on its own, the vocoder chords sound like this. Exactly the same as our normal chord progression. But once we got it set to sends only, this is where the magic happens.
Let's blame it on the chemicals.
And you can play with the formant. How cool is that? So now listen to it all together. Oh, that's cool. Let's throw in another riff as well, actually. Oh, vibes! Now I'm just indulging myself. And the beauty of that is you can actually use it for sounds other than vocals. So I've linked to a video there that's going to show you how to do it with drums. It's a really cool effect. Okay, now we're on to that final vocal tip, but don't underestimate this just because I'm showing it last. This has had a huge resurgence in popularity in recent years. So I've created this old school kind of breakbeat track. Sounds like this. Kind of a bit like Bicep. But what if we wanted to add a bit more of that old school rave flavor and add some vocals that have a gated effect? So the vocals on their own might sound like this. Which is cool, but I want to get that really stuttered trance gate effect. Now, there are a couple of ways you can do it. The first is simply to use a plugin like Trance Gate or Shaperbox that just allows you to load up a preset that's already got that pattern programmed in. But I want to show you how to do it manually because one, it gives you more control, and two, you'll understand what's actually happening. So I've created a trigger channel and it just sounds like this. And this is programmed in the pattern I want the vocal to be stuttered to. And it doesn't matter which sound you use, but I've just got a very sharp saw wave sound that gives me loads of control over the shape of this. Next thing we need to do is go to our vocal channel. Then I'm just going to compress the reverb into it so it's a nice elongated sound. So at the moment we've got this. But this noise gate is where the magic really happens. So a noise gate will literally close off the sound when it goes below a certain threshold that we get to set. And it will open it up when it goes above that threshold. And usually it would sound something like this. So we're not going to put any sidechain input. It's just going to shut off this sound when it goes below a certain level. So watch what happens here. And you can see it just shuts it off. But what we do when we select sidechain mode is we take an input source to trigger that gate opening and closing. So if we take that trigger to be that synth pattern that we just programmed in, it's going to sound like this. Amazing, right? So all together, you get this effect. Gives you those old school feels. And this works particularly well in trance music. In fact, it was one of the questions we had last night in our Accelerator Live group session. Love it. Now, you can use as few or as many of these tips together to create something truly special, but it's still not going to make your vocals actually sound good if you're not mixing and processing them properly. Thankfully, I've put together my top processing chain for vocals in this video here. Before you head over there though, don't forget to download my free vocal guide below this video. Thanks for watching and subscribing, and I'll catch you over at that next video.